Cool. So first off, thanks so much, man, for taking the time to come on and share your experience, share your insights. And as we get started, I just want to set a little bit of context and know kind of who you are, what you're doing now, and then a little bit about your past and what led you to where you are today.
Right, definitely. So my name is Wolfgang Lozana, also known as Coach Wolfgang VL on Instagram, or my YouTube channel right now. I go under the name of Chalice of Immortality because I talk a lot more about philosophical topics, tonic herbs, and things like that, but also a lot more advanced, nuanced health and well-being kind of concepts, similar to what Mr. Brandon Gilbert used to talk about earlier in his YouTube career. And I'm also a personal trainer of 10 years experience, a strength and conditioning coach for mostly combat athletes, but I train a wide variety of other types of athletes as well. And I also do health consultations, and I discuss things like, reversing disease and tonic herbs and how to get the most out of them and stuff like that. And I compete in jujitsu, hence the brutal, shirt right now, getting ready. Yeah, choking like 3 or 4 different people out, and I'm gonna do it again here in about a week.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think what I like about what you're doing and what you're putting out is that you're actually stress testing everything you teach and everything you tell people because you're doing it via combat, via competition. You're not just like a guy tucked away in his office somewhere, like maybe going to the gym occasionally, who can come up with these like cool, grandiose ideas. Or I can think of a lot of the kind of biohacking people that I won't name who come up with these like these amazing ideas, these amazing concepts that are scientifically based and based in all this stuff. But it's like, yeah, dude, I mean, you just sit at a desk and in a computer all day and you do more biohacking so you can do more biohacking so you can tell people about biohacking. Like it's a very different thing than a lot of us that are actually living in the real world, dealing with things and kind of like what you're doing, which is actually stress testing whether or not things actually work and whether or not they're actually useful in arguably some of the highest stress situations that a human can be in, which is direct physical combat with another human being. So
Right,
I don't know if there's really any other like more stressful scenarios than that. So I think that's
right.
really cool, and I think that definitely gives you an interesting perspective on that, which kind of segues me to want to learn more about your overall health journey and kind of where you are today and then how you got there and some of the key learning experiences and key milestones and turning points you had along the way.
Right. So, first of all, what Brandon just said, the meal is not the menu. And that is a reoccurring theme I had to literally through trial and error relearn over and over again throughout my journey is that a lot of fancy concepts look good on paper, but many times, like I learned in my year of veganism, they don't necessarily play out the way that all these scientists and things might say. So, yeah, I mean, where I am today is nothing like where I was when I first started. And so my health journey started, when I was a kid. So basically, a lot of my upbringing environment was a little bit unstable. I don't want to say exactly, exact people and specifics, but, because it wasn't
Right.
their fault. But yeah, so my mental health wasn't the best. I was diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder at the age of 9 years old. I actually was in and out of mental hospitals from the time I was 9 years old until I was about 12. And, getting in fights at school and having all sorts of crazy situations going on. And doctors, like literally, I had one of the supposed greatest psychiatrists in America who told my mother that I would never be able to live a normal life outside of a inpatient mental facility.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, and he said that that basically I would never be able to live on my own, never be able to have my own job or career, never be able to have any kind of healthy relationship with anyone whatsoever, and that if I attempted to, that I'd be violent or go crazy, basically. So on top of being in and out of mental health, yeah, I know it's crazy, right? And if you talk about like self-fulfilling prophecies, man, like these
Hmm.
days, like I look at society through the lens of limiting beliefs, like because how
Yeah.
I've seen so many people, they're told these things, like they're given doomsday diagnosis by doctors,
Hmm.
and they are told that there's no hope for them. Tonic
Right.
herbs aren't going to help, freaking therapy, psychology, nutrition. Your only option is to be doomed by your genetics and take these like pharmaceutical drugs.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
on top,
I think if I could just like interject on
definitely.
one thing, I think because I didn't know all that stuff about your past. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but specifics, not nothing too specific. I can relate as well because I didn't necessarily have the diagnoses or the intervention with the medical system, but I came from a similarly unstable situation where basically my brother was the one that was acting out. He was violent. He was a criminal. He like assaulted my parents. He assaulted me and like all this crazy shit for pretty much the vast majority of my early childhood years. So I feel like it kind of ties into what we were saying earlier about stress testing ideas and actually really having to, you know, really find stuff that actually works. Because I feel like there's obviously many different kinds of people that get attracted to health and healing and alternative stuff, right? There's people who maybe like us and some other people who have really legitimate shit that they're trying to overcome, right? And then I feel like there's nowadays it's kind of just
Mm.
cool and trendy and it's like the new thing to where
Everybody's
it's like you have
depressed.
people, yeah, exactly. It's like people, oh, I have trauma. I made that whole video about how trauma like
Yeah.
lost its meaning, all that kind of stuff, like these meanings, these concepts are really just losing their potency, their essence, and people are
And you
just
know
taking like
something? The
sure.
crazy thing is, if you tell somebody like, "Hey, man, you sound like you're depressed and stuff because of all these basic life things that aren't being taken care of," it's not
Right.
really nearly as bad as other people. Their own kind of
Yeah.
like projection, they're like, "Nah, you don't know what I'm going through." Like if you say that you had it worse than me, then you didn't actually have the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, it's also part of the whole character, the whole persona that goes with kind of being the professional victim,
Yeah.
which, I'm not putting anyone down and I'm not saying that's what everyone's doing, but there are a lot of people that are doing that. And there's definitely the mechanics in the therapy system to give people that mindset to where you just automatically have a defense or a way of putting everyone and everything down. I mean, I had times in my life where I definitely felt that way, and especially when I was trying to do actual traditional therapy, I eventually stopped because I realized it's just making me better and more efficient at being unwell. It's not necessarily empowering me with any of the skills that I needed personally to actually feel better or feel differently. It's just giving me more justification and reasoning and diagnoses and criteria and all these things for why I felt bad. But then I'm like, okay, well, how do I feel better? Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of like it is what it is. It's like we're really good at describing the problem,
Mhm.
but can we actually address it? So I think I say that because I can probably maybe you're similar as well, but I know for some people I can come off as mean or harsh or not understanding or not having empathy, but actually in my heart do have a lot of empathy for people who are legitimately dealing with things and legitimately wanting to find real solutions, which is why I have really no tolerance for bullshit or pretense or exploitation or any of those things because a lot of people come into the industry and just prey on and exploit and profit from people who genuinely need help, need
Right.
solutions, need guidance. And they're getting it from these kind of, I don't know,
Right.
charlatan, con artists, profiteers, whatever. And they end
Hypochondria,
up worse. They end up worse off,
a
which
hundred
I think is
percent.
really sad and bothersome.
Yeah, like so first and foremost, the more you dwell inside of your problem, the harder and harder it gets to like come out. because in order to get better, you've got to actually focus on the qualities and, in my opinion, the energetics that embody a person who's actually healthy. And,
Right.
this doesn't just go for people who have mental issues that stem from like childhood trauma, so to speak, but it also goes for, people who have health problems, for example. The more that they're like, I have candida, they self-diagnose themselves. I have these
Right.
dopamine problems and all this mental jargon that doesn't reflect like the actual reality of what's going on in their body. And then you have, I don't want to say too many names, like these whatever, integrative health or biohacking people or whatever, who like they prey on that. And they're like, well, if you have depression, you could be vitamin B 30,000 deficiency,
Yeah.
and
Right.
next thing you know, you're taking 50 different supplements. You don't have enough money to buy regular food, and you're
Yeah.
focusing so much on all of these minor things and completely missing the 20% of methods that will yield you 80% of results, like your sleep
Right.
cycles, like your organization of your life, and all these things that you have literally put in the forefront on your YouTube channel,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think it's at least what I've seen because I'm friends with a lot of alternative practitioners, whether Chinese medicine or integrative or naturopaths or whatever. And I've watched over the last 8 to 10 years that basically they just oftentimes become the exact thing that they're an alternative to, which is normally you go to a mainstream doctor, they talk to you for 5, 10 minutes, give you a diagnosis, give you a pill, and send you on your way. A lot of these people are doing the same thing. Maybe you take a test or a panel, and then, okay, they give you a bunch of supplements off of that, and then, okay, see you later and come back and talk to me, which I'm not saying doesn't work and doesn't have some validity. Of course, obviously, there are situations and certain things that are strictly nutritional or are strictly some kind of imbalance. And of course, you know, being B vitamin deficient will probably make you feel like crap, and having more B vitamins probably make you feel better. But on the flip side, people often don't ask, well, why are all those deficiencies there in the first
Right.
place? And if you actually get some balance and harmony in, the way you move, the way you exercise, the way you sleep, the way you eat, and the way you interact with other people, actually many of those
Right.
nutritional things actually can sort themselves out without you doing anything,
Right.
because a lot of those things are occurring because your body's in a state of excess or deficiency.
Right.
So I
Well,
mean, that's where I
and
think a lot.
it's not just the nutrition a lot of times that needs to be addressed. Like, because like I know that you used to do health consulting, and you probably had the experience where people, they've been dealing with the same problems for like 10 years, and then like
Right.
they've spent all this money on different like health professionals and stuff, and still haven't found the answer. And you might actually have helped them completely resolve the problems they came to you for, but they still think that they're sick, and they
Right.
want the magic herb or the magic pill. And you can clearly see, like, hey, that you've been focusing so much on health and the nirvana of health and longevity and all this stuff. When was the last time you got out
Right.
of your house? When was the last time you tried to develop actual skill and progression and a tangible purpose in life?
Yeah.
And that is where the leak of Jing or whatever actually is.
Right. Yeah, that's is very true, and I think whatever you described, what you just described, is I spent many years of my life there, and I've probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on different health things, whether it's supplements or herbs or
Yeah.
bodywork modalities or so many different things, right? I mean,
Yep.
it was my like career for quite a while,
Yep.
and then I just realized at a certain point, uh, I don't really want to be doing this. I'd rather actually be living my life and
Right.
feeling like,
At some point, like, I got to be healthy eventually. When is all this money and investment actually going to allow me to live my life finally? You
right,
know, and that's the thing that I realized too is, um, eventually I got healthy, and when I got healthy and I had no more health issues, then I was like, well, fuck, I'm bored as hell. What am I going to do now? That's why I do jujitsu and everything now, because like I came to natural health to solve very specific issues, and then I
yeah,
finally solved them. I have all this information, so I might as well share it through my YouTube and teach other people. But I don't need to like read the latest Dave Asprey book or the latest
Yeah.
podcast. You know what I mean?
I mean, I agree completely, and I think that's probably why people might have noticed that my emphasis on health over the last 8 years has been fairly minimal.
Yep.
And even
I
when
could
I was
tell.
asking, yeah, asking people on my YouTube channel, like, who should I interview? A lot of it was like, biohackers and random health
Yeah.
people and scientists. And I'm just like, I can't do that because it's not interesting to me, and I would be bored out of my literal mind just going over minutia about these kinds of things,
That
which
everyone's
I can
already
understand.
heard before too. And it's like, what new crap can they even offer that they haven't already talked about on another podcast?
I mean, it's basically just come full circle now, where it's just like, yeah, eat food, exercise, go outside, get sun, drink water. It's like, whoa,
Right?
seriously? Like,
Groundbreaking.
yeah. And I think even Dave Asprey, he went so far to the complexity where now his whole thing, his newest thing is about doing less, being
Oh
lazy,
yeah.
not doing so many things. And I'm
Work
just
work
like,
smarter, not harder is his thing, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's like he was one of these biohackers that, they went so far heavy on like keto and all of these things that they started supplementing with like fructose powder.
Yeah. Then it's like, why even be keto?
I'm just like, you went so far to the extreme that now you're worse off. You're like, oh my God, I realized the brain runs on glucose, so I need to supplement with fructose, and I feel way better. I'm just like, or you could just like eat fruits and
Yeah.
vegetables, like,
And I mean the
just like,
whole the whole keto thing, in my experience and research is a really nuanced kind of thing. But it does get to a point where if keto doesn't work for you, the solution's not
yeah,
necessarily to biohack further. The solution might just be
right.
to add some basic carbs back in.
Just like eat regular normal food. It's like not, because I remember another guy, Mark Sisson, right? Because
Oh,
he was
hell yeah.
super big. He's actually, really not that bad. I never really followed him. I just saw him as like, old school paleo guy.
Yeah.
But then I saw a video, I don't know, a year or so ago, and he's like, yeah, now I practice metabolic flexibility, so I
Well,
can get.
yeah,
I'm just like,
that's been kind of like a reoccurring theme in his kind of ideology for a long time. And personally, I do like Mark Sisson because within the
yeah,
paleosphere, I feel like he's
right,
the most sensible, expert in the field. But metabolic
yeah,
flexibility is the idea, that if you have to go like, 20 hours without food or without carbohydrates, you'll be able to do so without noticing. But then
okay,
if you do eat some carbs, you're not gonna like have a freaking glucose shock or some crazy stuff. But on that tangent, let's get back to kind of like my health journey because a lot of
for
this is
sure,
kind of relevant. So,
of course,
and
yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah,
great conversation, by the way. So,
of course,
so yeah, I was at the same time as me, going in and out of mental hospitals, I was also put on mega high doses of Seroquel. And Seroquel is like a horse pill, the most hardcore, like antipsychotic medication that there is.
hmm,
And I was literally like 11 years old when I was put on that. And I'm talking, bro, for real, like, and we're talking like neurochemical imbalances in the brain supposedly causing bipolar disorder. Like, what kind of
yeah,
neurochemical imbalances do you think might be caused by just taking such a hardcore antipsychotic drug? So,
yep,
and I was on like 2,400 milligrams a day. So, anyone who knows
Jesus,
about, yeah, that was crazy. So here I was, like a zombie, literally would sleep 24 to 48 hours at a time. And I was in and out of different schools. So eventually, my mom took me out of school. I was kind of homeschooled for a while. Eventually, graduated from a self paced program at the age of 16, somehow. And mind you, not that it matters, but had like
right,
140. I had 149 IQ in the second grade. And I think that was part of the issue, maybe. But so, eventually after being out of school, the school system for a while, and then my family problems, kind of ironing out, along with that came a lot of the emotional stress and other things that as a child, I just had no way of really sorting out because I
Of
guess my
course.
logic hadn't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
you're a child.
yeah, yeah. It's like, am I really supposed to be able to think logically about drama and stuff at that age? But I'm sure you know, even when you become an adult, most adults still don't think logically.
Right.
So,
Right.
anyway, so yeah, so somehow, eventually, I got a bunch of friends and I went back to regular school and all this stuff. And I kind of stopped taking the Seroquel on my own accord, despite my psychiatrist and my mother like cautioning against that because how the hell am I going to do anything in life if I'm like a damn zombie on a tranquilizer? So
Right.
fast forward to I turned 21. This was like 2012 or something. 21 years old, and I just said, I'm just done with the Seroquel because I started seeing a psychologist around that time, and my and because I was dealing with panic disorder, believe it or not, constant anxiety attacks and things, and so I saw a new psychologist when I turned 21, and he told me that he sees zero signs of actual mental illness, believe it or not. He told me, he said, look, maybe when you were a kid, you might have had some extreme ADHD and some childhood problems and stuff with the family. But, his whole dissertation, his PhD dissertation was on gifted children and childhood, psychosis. And he said, look,
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and you're not one of them. And he, I don't know if it was a placebo effect or what, but he told me, he said, uh, you know, you need to work on actually building your life now. Because at the time, believe it or not, okay, somehow, believe it or not, at the time, my whole thing was I was in bands. I was like doing death metal shows, and my whole thing was girls. All I would do is date girls. So he's
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do professionally? Be a gigolo? So I didn't know what the hell he was talking about at that time. But that was when, everything kind of hit the fan. I got off the medications. I was tired of relying on other people for my success because I was in a band. I was the only one bringing, people to the shows. And I wanted to do something different. So I had already kind of been brought into martial arts at that time. All of my best friends were like black belts in karate and stuff. So I started to get into physical fitness and started doing martial arts, started becoming a personal trainer. And while coming off the Seroquel, I started having all sorts of crazy symptoms. So, dude, like I thought that I was going crazy. I remember feeling like I was in a dream, depersonalization. I had extreme breathlessness, couldn't catch my breath. The anxiety attacks were like every 2 or 3 hours. So I wasn't sure if like I was having withdrawals from the Seroquel or what. And my mom took me to the damn emergency room, and the psychiatrist on duty told her that it's the freaking bipolar disorder coming back. And and he's like, he needs to get back on antipsychotics ASAP. And
Oh
my
my
mom's
God.
all like, my mom's freaking out. So anyway, long story short, literally went back and forth through that. I went to the doctors, tried to figure out what was wrong with me. None of the mainstream doctors during that time could tell me what was wrong. I started to notice how fat and unhealthy the mainstream doctors were, and they were having
Mm.
fights, and the doctor was fighting with his secretary. They were really stressed. And I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to figure out how to be healthy when these people clearly have zero skill in the actual practice of health? Exactly. And so, long story short, 2014, I had actually one of my best friends in 2012. He was into Chinese martial arts and stuff. I started to do real Shaolin Kung Fu, like from the Shaolin Temple. They taught me Tai Chi, Qigong, and they also made me learn Chinese at the time. And I was doing meditation and all that other stuff. Um, but I had the madness, they said. Like I clearly was, my mind was all over the place. Eventually 2014 came around, and I started experimenting with tonic herbs. So this is around the time when I actually I actually started to watch your videos. 2013,
Okay.
2014. Mr.
All
Brandon
right.
Gilbert, he had videos on like how to deal with anxiety and decalcifying the pineal gland and all this stuff. And so I had started working with holy basil and freaking
Mm.
gynostemma.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had also started getting into veganism, unfortunately, because I was also dealing with psoriasis, irritable bowel syndrome. I had like the more like I started trying to eat healthy to try to solve my problems. And the healthier I was trying to be, I was doing whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. I was following
Oof.
Dr. Michael Greger and all these like vegan doctors. And like my mental health got way better when I started doing holy basil and really welcoming the panic. My big thing was anytime I felt a panic attack coming along, I was like, this is a golden opportunity for me to use the chamomile holy basil tea that I bought. And I was
Uh-huh.
excited. I'm like, let's go. Let's really see if like this, this holy basil will work. Suddenly, like the panic attack just faded in my anticipation. So by being excited for the panic attack just went away, and next thing you know, I almost never had a panic attack again.
Wow.
So, so then veganism, basically, the more vegan I became, the worse and worse my symptoms got. And I don't think veganism is inherently bad. It's just that the base of my diet, because I was really into Chinese medicine at the time, I was like, I'm going to fortify my Jing. I'm going to eat only black rice, royal rice. I'm going to eat black chia seeds, black sesame seeds.
Uh-huh.
And everything to me, it had to be medicinal and whole grains
Yeah.
and stuff. I was into superfoods, and I literally spent like $10,000 a year at least $1,000 a month on probiotics, prebiotics, freaking
Yeah.
greens powders. I had a friend who was a Chinese medicine doctor, and he had me buying neem tablets, neem soaps.
Hmm.
He had me doing all of this stuff to like try to heal my psoriasis, and eventually what it got to was um, I said, look, I'm seeing these grains that I'm paying all this money for in the other side of the toilet. I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop eating the foods that I see in the toilet, and I'm gonna eat mostly the foods that I can digest and make me feel good. And so the psoriasis went away
Hmm.
almost with instantly, like within 4 days. My anxiety completely my anxiety completely went away,
Hmm.
mostly because of the tonic herbs, honestly, and the
Yeah.
meditation practices, and also because I could actually digest what I was eating. I could breathe because my damn intestine wasn't, you know, interfering with my diaphragm,
Yep.
and cut out a lot of the caffeine, whatever. And that was 2015. Literally, like, that was the golden ticket. So, sorry, I
Yeah.
kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, no, that's all good. That's a lot of there's a lot of good stuff there, a lot of good points. I just want to go back to kind of what you mentioned briefly about your IQ in second grade and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think for a lot of people have a similar experience because the educational system is specifically designed to basically produce factory workers, at
Mm,
least in America. That's
mm,
how it was formulated and put together. That's how it's structured. Obviously, now people are kind of starting to open up and change things around a little bit. So
mm.
it's not designed for anyone of any above average intellect in any way, shape, or form. And
Yep.
basically, because I mean, I can relate.
Mm,
I hated school from day one. Kindergarten, hated it. Was like, how can I never do this again? Like, how can I just get out of this situation? But I
yeah.
love learning.
Right.
I love learning, and so there's all these characteristics of people that are actually intelligent, or at least have maybe the possibility of being intelligent, maybe the possibility of being skilled in something,
Mm.
but they're being surrounded by
Oh
people
yeah.
who are wanting to be like generalists
Yeah.
and like invest spread themselves across all this crap they don't care about, which obviously for kids, I understand they need a foundation of just basic things to navigate the world, you know, I get
Right.
that. But at least for me, that was it took a lot of work because like no one in my particular situation growing up, I would say was really that intelligent or really that gifted or that interested or inspired or passionate about anything or creative or
Right.
anything like that. So it's like if you are this way and no one in your environment is that way, you're automatically in conflict. You're automatically the weirdo. And of course, if you do anything outside of what is the norm, everyone's uncomfortable. So now they're shooting you down. So it's like you have what you actually feel and perceive in reality, which might actually be quite accurate, but then you have all these people telling you it's wrong. You know, people that you're supposed to respect, you're supposed to look up to. They're adults, they're authority figures, they're teachers, they're
Yep.
whatever professional. So it just creates this, it just lays the groundwork for really not a good sense of identity and not a good sense of emotional stability. And I
Right.
think, at least,
Again,
at
like
least,
the meal is not the menu. And like what you're saying,
right.
how many of these people actually are happy, actually have the success that you want?
Yeah.
You know, the
Like,
majority of them, they don't,
exactly.
have they found the path?
It's just oftentimes just repeating and saying like whatever they were told to repeat and say.
Exactly.
I can remember when I was very little, um, we were on the way home from church because I had to go to church every week up until I was a teenager. And I asked my mom if I could commit suicide
Oh God.
so I could go be with Jesus.
Oh God.
And she was like super pissed.
Yeah.
And I got in trouble. I had to sit in the corner. I probably had to wash my mouth out with soap. Like
Oh
I
my
got
God.
really shot down. And I was probably like 5 at that
Yeah.
time or something. And after that, I was just like, yeah, this whole thing's a racket. Like, I mean, not to denigrate anyone's belief system or whatever, but I just saw all the hypocrisy,
Yeah.
all of the here's what we're sitting and we're learning about, but no one's actually doing it. So then I just start asking these questions, like things aren't lining up. It's like what you were saying earlier about, you know, the doctor and the you're looking to really unhealthy people to tell you about health. So
Right.
it's like I feel like if you're a kid and you realize A plus B does not equal C, but everyone else is telling you that it does, now then you start questioning yourself, and that creates a lot of discord. When in reality, the only reason I asked that question to my mom is because all they ever talked about was heaven after you die. You got to do this so you can get to heaven. And that was just everything.
Show me
So,
this
like, to
heaven.
anyone with, yeah. So it's like anyone with a half a brain, you're like, oh, that's obviously the point. Because you're not saying anything about how to
Right.
live, how to do this now, how to enjoy this, how to be with this. So it's like that's the obvious conclusion. And I can think of a lot of other examples from being a kid to where I just eventually learned I'm just not going to say anything because it's going to result in conflict and discord,
Ah,
which that
geez.
took me years to unwind because I realized, oh, I actually wasn't crazy. I wasn't
Yeah.
stupid. Actually was just curious and observant and a little bit perceptive.
Yeah.
So it's like that's kind of it's kind of the reason why a lot of my previous YouTube videos were a little aggro because
Yeah.
it's like I was upset and then you know so I think there's just a lot to that and I think it's still something that I see at least personally in presenting ideas and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
Like there's just a certain degree of complexity that I think some people can't
Grasp.
compute
Yeah.
exactly or like to have two slightly conflicting ideas
Yeah.
or multiple slightly conflicting ideas
And
sitting
it's
next
either
to each
one or
other
the
is
other.
like yeah exactly
It's either one or
um,
the other. Like people like if you say something like, "Oh, Makuna is not a tonic herb or something," right? Or
yeah
I just feel like reishi is more sustainable than taking like some kind of hardcore GABAergic drug or something. Then automatically
right
people think that you're saying, "What are you telling me that?" GABAergic drugs are just like the devil, or you know. And it's like, no, that's not what like. People don't seek understanding. Like they're always trying to
yeah
project their preconceptions onto you.
yeah I mean I think that's just some sort of adaptive strategy because it's easier and more efficient for your brain than computing things like in the present moment and arriving at conclusions. It's just easier to, oh, this looks like what I know previously, so it must be the same, so I can just lump it in and not have to think about it. Plus, I guess on the flip side, not everyone is like a freak about this stuff. Like maybe we
True.
are, or maybe people have, you
True.
know, really busy lives. So like I totally and
True.
understand and respect that. Um, so
I
it's
think
like,
that's probably like the biggest point of accuracy, honestly, because
yeah,
because on one side of things, I always wonder why everybody else just automatically believes what they do without trying to understand deeper, without asking, is this really true or not? But
right,
then I think to myself, well, holy crap, like the average person, they only have like, they work a 9 to 5. Then when they get off
yeah,
work, they're so exhausted from the 9 to 5. It's a lot easier just to rely on a guru, like, I don't want to
yeah,
say names, but without
sure,
questioning them. They just want somebody to tell them what to think, you
right,
know. And unfortunately that yields poor results because then you're just like a slave to the master, whatever master you choose. But I also wonder if, in the past I've asked, is it a genetic mental thing? Which I don't, coming from a place where I was told I had a genetic mental thing, I don't like to think that way. But I've asked
right,
my psychologist previously about this. I'm like, is it just that the average person is incapable of critical thinking? And he told me that it's an IQ problem, but I don't like to believe that. I don't. I think a lot of people's problem is that they automatically assume anybody with an opposing opinion than theirs is just automatically stupid or less intelligent than them. But
yeah.
so I don't know which one it is, but I often feel lonely because of that, honestly.
I mean, I think it's probably a mix. Like as many variables as we can name, it's a mix of them. I think.
Yeah.
I think there is something to be said that increase or intelligence, I think, can be increased because personally speaking, I don't feel like I was ever particularly bright as a kid.
Same here.
Like I felt like kind of an idiot. I did a lot of dumb stuff. I made a lot of mistakes. I couldn't really remember shit. I was just super foggy.
Yeah.
And then in my 20s, when I was in college, I consciously made the decision to try to be more intelligent. And then I worked at that. And I made videos about that. All of my videos about increasing intelligence, all those things is literally what I did and still what I do
Hmm.
if I want to do that. And people, you know, will criticize me and say whatever. I'm like, no, dude, this is what I did. This is how I got here. So I
Right.
think it is possible. I think, I
But
mean,
maybe
what I
people need a
realized,
desire. Like they need a desire to
yeah,
feel more intelligent because I didn't start to actually develop my knowledge base or any of that,
yeah,
my understanding of the world until I was tired of not knowing. I was suffering because
yeah.
of it, you know?
I think pain, unfortunately, is the great motivator. You know,
Yeah.
like people sometimes, like I'll do podcasts and people interview me and I'll tell them my story or whatever. Like, oh my God, that's so cool. And I'm like, honestly, it doesn't feel cool to me. I'm trying to solve problems. I'm
Right.
trying to move from a lack of knowledge and chaos to understanding and order. That's it. And this has just happened to be how the shit manifested. Like, I started a business because I literally didn't want to have a job and I saw no other real options for myself. It wasn't like a sexy, cool, exciting, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and all this. Like, no, it was none of that. It was just like, well, don't know what else I'm going to do. And I suck at being an employee, but I have, you know, some skill sets here. Maybe I can try to make a living out of it and pull myself up out of living off of $400 a month, like this kind of shit.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, and I think that's true for at least a lot of people that I've met that I respect that have skill and insight and success in things. For them, it's not a vanity exercise. It's a practical, let me solve a problem
Yeah.
exercise, which then can transform into follow my passion, my
Yeah.
interests, and these other things. But
That's
it
exactly what
usually
happened.
starts,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that
exactly.
might have been kind of what happened with you and the herbalism thing. That's definitely what happened to me. Outside of my jujitsu and stuff, like literally as a health consultant or a personal trainer, I'm I'm literally just gifting off all the knowledge I found on my own because I used to be suffering just like they are. And
Yeah.
as a side effect, you acquire all this knowledge and then you just be genuinely interested in the subject.
Yeah, and then hopefully be able to understand enough about the subject and understand enough about that person to be able to accurately ascertain what exactly they need in that moment that will actually be useful and helpful, not just say a bunch of shit that sounds
Right.
cool, which I think ideally is what people in authority positions should be doing, meaning you should go to them. They should know so much about their subject, be able to look at you in such a clear, concise, and most importantly, accurate way to tell you, oh, this is what exactly you need to do for this step and then the next step. Whereas now I feel like there's a massive deficiency where it's like people are just like, I don't know, try this. I don't know, try that. I don't know, let's do labs. Let's do all these other things. And I
Yeah,
feel like, actual insight and skill
I
is
think
very,
there's two sides to this. Like there's two reasons for this. I think the first one is that there is this like cognitive laziness where they lack the understanding. This is common in medical, mainstream medicine. They just kind of use genetics as a scapegoat. And like,
right,
oh, well, you're sick because you're hereditary. All your freaking family
right.
members have like diabetes, therefore it's genetic. Not understanding enough about like the science of like diabetes to know that, hey, it's not their family, it's society and our culture that has diabetes because everybody's eating the same junk.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's not question the fact they drink a 2 liter of Coca-Cola every day and
yeah,
that's normal in their family. Let's not look at that.
right, right. Well, because then they can't sell them a medication, and their whole
Right.
worldview would need to shatter for them to accept the fact that it might be the food that they're eating, and then they lose customers. The
Exactly.
the benefit of accepting the truth is is they mostly lose if they accept the fact that it's their diet. They
Yeah.
lose customers, they
Yeah.
lose their expertise. So the second avenue though is again the meal is not the menu, and like
Right.
really like because I've had so many people come to me saying, "Hey Wolfgang, I think I have like a dopamine deficiency," or here's a good one, "I have candida. I've done the self
Yeah. Yeah.
test where I spit into like a water bottle and I watched Candida Crusher on YouTube, and he told me that all of my symptoms are Candida." And
Hmm.
I've been, I spent $4,500 on this like Candida cleanse kit, and this 4-day probiotic thing, and I blasted my intestine out with bentonite clay, you know, and like
Hmm.
I'm still, I still got the white tongue, and I'm like, and I
Yeah.
asked him, I'm like, hey, have you ever considered the possibility that maybe your white tongue is maybe your dental hygiene habits, or you know,
Hmm.
it may not be candida. Like we have this concept of
Right.
what we think is the problem, but is it really? You know? So you're focusing on something like a concept so hard that you can't see the actual reality, and you're so convinced of the conceptual idea of what's going on that you're not even willing to ask all the other possibilities.
Exactly. It's kind of just like people see the universe through like Jesus versus Satan.
Yeah.
So it's like that cosmology, that worldview translates to where you're always just looking for the single evil culprit. And if you can just get rid of that single evil thing and eliminate it, then you'll be fine. And it's like I think I made a video about this like 12 years ago. I called it the monocropping of consciousness or something like that, because that same mechanic, if you look at monocropping and agriculture, they kind of have the same idea. We're going to grow this one plant in this one way, and all these other organisms are bad, so we're going to get rid of them. Or people will look in their mindset and say, oh, well, only these emotions are positive, and I have to get rid of all of these that are negative. And it's like just the same idea, the same mechanic, the same cosmology that just keeps repeating over and over across the board. It never produces good results, but people just keep doing it because they just don't want to actually step back and ask any type of other question. And a great example of this, historically speaking, not a lot of people know about this, but during the Cultural Revolution in China, there was like massive famine where like 100 million people died, like something insane like that, right?
Jesus.
And the major reason why this occurred is because they identified some bird, one single species of bird that they thought was like evil or a pest. So they focused all of their energy and all of their attention to get rid of that one bird. And they did actually. They were successful. Great.
Yeah.
What a win. What they didn't realize is that bird was actually feeding on this other type of pest and insect, which went unchecked, which completely decimated all of their crops, caused a massive starvation, a massive shortage. Well, actually, kind of to a degree, it caused a shortage for the peasants, when in reality, the government at that time had massive storehouses and stocks of grain that they could have released and saved the population, but they chose not to. But it's just, again, another example of that ridiculous idea playing out and causing people massive harm. And it's just, it goes back to what you've been saying about the menu not being the meal. And
Right, right. Well, yeah, and let's take this even further. Like, this is very common with dogmatic tribes in nutrition, for example.
right, right,
People that are into, for example, ketogenic diets, which I'm very, very well read on, and I believe that they can be very therapeutic in certain contexts. But a lot
yep,
of people, they are so like bought into the paradigm that carbohydrates are bad, that they might start have an issue. Like, let's say they're trying to do jujitsu, for example, where they are suffering, their performance is going down or whatever, and they might actually benefit from a little bit of carbohydrate. But then if they choose to add a little bit of carbohydrate, suddenly their whole worldview that carbs are like the devil, they're just poisonous, there's zero all they're going to do is rot my teeth. If
yeah,
what is if why would God, this is something I heard before, why would God put a food on the planet that rots your teeth? And that it's just like, look, here's the thing. You either continue suffering the way you are
yeah,
because you're a mascot to your dogma, or you just add this
yeah,
little bit of carb or whatever and see if it works for you.
yeah.
You know?
I
And the
guess the
same thing,
idea is,
yeah.
I was
What do
going
you
to
say?
say, the idea of having something work for you versus you working for it.
Exactly.
You know
A
what I
hundred
mean?
percent. And this is prevalent in like the mainstream medical industry too, where, and this is the craziest thing, man, where, let's say I have really bad digestive disorder. This is common. And they're telling me like, oh, you have colitis. The only option is to remove your colon. And I'm like, what about food? Is there something I do with food? And they're like, nah, like that food crap. Like anyone who tells you that changing your diet will help your colitis, they're quacks. They're on quackwatch.com, and
Yeah,
yeah, they're not professionals. They don't have a degree, whatever. And then let's just say I'm like, all right, give me like 4 weeks, right? And we'll see what happens. So then I, maybe look up solutions that other people found, maybe even on Reddit, right? Anecdotes, so scary, woo. And I find this guy named Wolfgang who removed like whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, and suddenly he wasn't pissing out blood out of his asshole. And
yeah,
and then I return to the doctor, and I'm like, hey man, like I freaking somehow miraculously don't bleed anymore. I think I healed my colitis by just removing a couple of simple food groups. And then they'll be like, what? You're going to die of like a vitamin deficiency. You need whole grains. And that's a placebo effect. Like, you may be feeling better now. Yeah, no, this is so common. It's a placebo effect. And trust me, you will regret removing those grains, and your colon is going to explode. Believe me. You need to remove your colon. And it's like a complete cognitive dissonance. It's like, what the hell, man?
I mean, I guess at a certain point we should ask, what is the definition of superstition? I thought we were scientific. I
Yeah.
thought we were modern, advanced creatures. Apparently we're not. Apparently we're still just as dogmatic, tribal, primitive and superstitious as we have been for a very long time, because a lot of the stuff people say is it's literally just superstition. You ask, well, what's the science? What's the justification? Oh, there isn't any. Oh, okay. Well, then what's it based on? I don't know. I mean, so it's like, it's I don't, and it's like, how are you a medical professional and you look yourself in the mirror every day and you say this kind of shit to other human beings and not realize how absurd that it is? Do you know what I mean? Like
And I
that just
mean,
boggles my mind.
I think that, again, I don't think, because I train a lot of nurses and doctors as a personal trainer, and I've talked to a lot of them, and a large majority, the ones I've talked to, they get into it because they
Yeah.
genuinely want to help people. But the problem
Yep.
is, the education that they get as in school is not enough to actually help people, and they
Right.
lack actual real skill in the practice of helping people per se, of actually healing
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I mean, I realized that too, at a certain point, because when I was younger, I was kind of aggro and super upset about mainstream medicine, whatever. And then I eventually
Yeah,
realized, like, these are just people, and the vast majority of people, they have good hearts, they have good intentions, they want to help
right.
they want to help
We all want to
people.
live a good life.
Exactly. It's just also, realistically speaking, a lot of them have, massive student loan debt. They're
Yeah,
stressed, they're
true.
overworked. Like, just all these situational environmental factors
A hundred
that
percent.
work against people. I mean, they work for, profit and for the system, but they work against people. They work against
Yeah, it's
individuals.
like the
So it's like,
practitioners
yeah,
are not inherently evil per se. It's just the system
exactly, not at
itself.
all.
It's Yeah, the system itself is set up to fail. And maybe some people might have some not so positive intentions, but and obviously we all need to make a living. A lot
Exactly.
there's this weird dialogue that goes on where, especially in alternative health circles, where they're like,
Right.
all doctors, they're evil drug dealers and they just want to push pills on us. I used to feel that way, man, because I had that
Yeah,
emotional trauma, so to speak, because I was
for sure.
I was told that I would,
Yeah.
and so that shit always messed with me until eventually when I started to actually get healthy and I started to actually like, live a life of purpose and fulfillment and build skill and tangible qualities. I realized,
Yeah.
man, it's not these people's fault, and this is my emotional baggage that I am projecting onto these health professionals.
Yeah, that's really a good point. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the health world kind of goes in that direction, and it ends up just being another way of stimulating people's fight or flight response and keeping them angry and upset all the time, which never interested me, never been my style personally. Even though, of course, many of their critiques are valid. I mean, just the pharmaceutical
Yeah.
industry in general. And I mean, if anyone's ever watched the series called Dope Sick on Hulu,
Hmm.
with Michael Keaton. It's
No.
about Purdue Pharmaceutical, the Sackler family, and how they created the opioid crisis
Mm.
through
Yeah.
blatantly lying and deceiving people about oxycodone or
Oh, hell yeah.
OxyContin.
The
So it's
pharmaceutical
like, yeah,
industry,
obviously
yeah,
there's a
that's
lot
a
of
whole nother
validity to it.
story. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
whole nother story. And unfortunately, the medical professionals, who get into medicine, they develop a cognitive bias to where
yeah,
they reject any of the so-called conspiracy theories like this that are actually real. And
yeah,
with COVID, okay, it came out full circle, where they
yeah.
were, and that's just unfortunate because their whole identity is surrounding it. But yeah, 100%, there is a legitimate lying
Right.
that's not for the good of the people going on. 100%.
I mean, I can say, at least anecdotally, I think more and more people are realizing this,
Oh yeah,
because,
oh
over
yeah.
the last 5 years or so, I've met tons of, pharmacists, nurses, doctors, people working in the actual medical field who are just like, yeah, there's some really messed up stuff going on here. And I remember being out at a restaurant last summer, and these two ladies were at the table behind me, and they were both nurses, and they were just being like, yeah, I think what we were doing was actually what was killing people from you know what, you know. And she was like, yeah, I realized what we were doing was not actually helping, and I think we might have actually killed a lot of people and doing all this stuff. And I'm just looking around like, wait, what? And these are just two nurses, looking at their own experience and reflecting on what they did and what they were told and all these different
Yeah.
things. And I'm just like, man, like but at the same time, like, it
That's
is
why we're getting
really,
censored too. That's why there's this censorship thing going on. Like
yeah,
Facebook groups are being removed from like the internet. Yeah, all these people are getting banned from Twitter, and then YouTube and Instagram will down regulate the algorithm if you start to actually
yep,
give people real information because they're recognizing, like Joe Rogan, for example, for out of all
mm,
people, he has like 3 or 4 times the amount of exposure and viewership than mainstream media like CNN does. So people are waking up at least to,
yeah.
you know, and they don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a news clip where might have been the head of the FDA or some major medical czar, major medical authority in America was saying the number one threat to people's health in America is misinformation.
Oh,
And the
Jesus.
reason why the health or the life expectancy in America is declining is because of misinformation. So
Was
I'm just
that
kind of
what
like,
that was that
well,
recent video that you had shared, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I had seen that.
And
And
it
and
was
no,
a 30-minute interview this guy did on the news talking about, oh, this is the biggest threat. And it's
yeah,
like,
unfortunately, that can go either way. Misinformation,
right,
it's the mill is not the menu. It could be it's a
right,
subjective term, nebulous, and
exactly,
the mainstream media tries to spin that like any reishi or anything alternative to mainstream medicine is misinformation, or you have
yeah,
like documented facts, like legit documents and everything, where you're like, hey, this is what's actually going on with the political landscape. What you're being told by CNN is factually wrong and incorrect, and then
exactly.
that person is outed as a quack and misinformation. So,
Yeah, actually, in future podcasts and some videos I'm working on, I'm gonna break down the mechanics that were behind all of the pandemic stuff, and then the mechanics that are behind the climate crisis, and then the trans agenda, because it's basically the same kind of mechanics where, long story short, people at the top with money and influence
yeah,
basically decide what they want to do, what they want to say. And then
yeah,
there's these independent third parties, quote unquote, that
right.
they have the facts. And then social media,
Social
news
engineering.
agencies.
They socially
What's that?
engineer they socially engineer the society's
Yeah,
perspective to meet the agenda of those that are in power.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like Facebook and all of those outlets are getting their quote unquote truth from these independent third entities, and then they're having it enforced by another independent third entity. Like, it's all this kind of shell corporation outsourcing stuff to basically dance around the legality of it. Like, Facebook themselves don't do the censoring. They have an independent third party company
Yeah.
that is their, source of truth, which gets their source of truth from an independent third party company, but it's like all financed by the same people, so you can trace it pretty easily. And it's the same for all of these agendas. It's the same mechanics. There's a
Yeah.
pre-approved set of things that are true, and anything outside of that is, like you're saying, it's misinformation. So we're definitely kind of getting into possibly a little bit of a dark age, but it's just, again, it's kind of just more along the lines of everything we've been saying,
Yeah.
where, like, if the general populace is unable to think critically or filter information to any degree of accuracy, and they're set up to just accept whatever comes on because their fight or flight response is
Yes.
engaged,
Yeah.
then of course we see kind of what happened with the pandemic, and then we see this massive division created that's just more or less getting worse.
Oh, geez.
And that's
That
ultimately, yeah,
and so for me, I like to look at what's the best way to approach, the most effective way to approach improving society, so to speak, in a way that actually makes this dynamic more in favor of what's right or what's real. And to
Right.
me, because obviously arguing with people in internet comments, random strangers with no avatar, like that's not going to help. And the other thing is
No,
that these videos that we're making, YouTube filters its algorithm to give you more of what you already see. So we could
exactly.
talk all the logic we want. Number one, convincing someone who disagrees of what we're saying, it's not going to help. So that is out of the picture because they're just going to keep emotionally reacting to what we're saying. They're like, no, you're a quack. You're full of crap. Dr.
Yeah.
Fauci, he's the god or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so for me, what I kind of recognize is something you keep saying, overactive fight or flight nervous system. Because I noticed this morning, let's just say, when
Mhm.
I got a new phone and all this stuff, and my Bluetooth wasn't working real good, and it kept disconnecting, and I was getting mad. I'm like, I hate modern technology, right? So then I kind of cooled down a little bit and breathed a little bit, and then I realized when I calmed down, oh crap, I just need to add my phone on my as a default phone on my car. And so when I calm down,
Yeah.
I can see the solution and I can think critically. And then I laughed at myself afterwards. I'm like, see, Wolfgang, this is why you should like not get angry because you can't think straight. So for me, what I think is for me, I like to focus more on getting people to restore their energy and their emotions and whatnot, and grounding them down,
Yeah.
to a calm place. Because
Right.
like you're saying, like one of the biggest problems with people is they're overwhelmed. They're bored as shit, but they're being exhausted from the boredom, and they need
Yeah.
stimulation. And they get it by triggering themselves with the arguing back and forth. So I think tonic herbs, I think philosophy and meditation, all this stuff, to be honest with you, is a good way of getting people to calm down to where their brain can work a little bit better. But at the
Absolutely.
same time, I don't even know if that's going to help, honestly.
I mean, I think the first step is always inherent desire and intention within someone,
True.
which, like we established, sometimes pain is unfortunately the best motivator.
True.
Um, so it's one of those things. If we can, if we weave ourselves into this vague sense of comfort, that's kind of just this numb lull, then the drive or the motivation to actually change or improve or alter anything is going to be diminished because it's like,
Mm.
well, I'm kind of comfortable and this is a safe, kind of easy space.
Right.
And then sometimes, unfortunately, life has other plans for people, and people have, bad situations or bad whatever, and that can unfortunately be the wake up call. Um,
Mm.
which I remember I did a video like 2011 or something. It was like the four stages of drama.
Mm.
And I actually got this from one of my mentors. And it was basically just like, kind of the first stage is just like you see something, you react, you solve the problem, and you move on. Or you have an experience, you take the lesson, and you move on.
Mm.
And then towards the end, as it progresses, it gets worse. And then the end result is like death, pain, fire, destruction, crazy
Mm.
disease. And in reality, a lot of the times it's just a manifestation of something we were just in denial of, or didn't want to look at, or didn't want to accept, or didn't want to deal with, that just progressively gets worse over
Mm.
time. And if you think about it too, if you look at like just stupid TV dramas or movies, whenever there's conflict between people, the vast majority of the time, the script is always, actually, I just wanted to say this thing, but I was too afraid to just say this thing. So now the whole movie is me creating all this drama
Oh,
and
jeez.
all this up and down just so we can maybe say this thing. And like that, there you go. That's however many romantic comedies and dramas and different things. It's just basically comes back to that thing. So it's like, there's this, it seems like there's some kind of inherent thing within life to where it's like actually being able to look at something and deal with it earlier is a lot better than dealing with it later.
So I
And then the
mean,
more we push it away tends to be the more
I
problems it
yeah,
creates.
I think what you're saying is accurate to a degree, but I think that it's
Yeah,
definitely more nuanced than that. And this is a hard thing
sure.
because to me, this sounds similar to, it's like people are like, just say what's on, like I'm authentic. I gotta just be
Oh yeah,
real.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just be real, just be authentic, say what's on your mind. And then if someone's
No,
authentically,
that's not what I mean, really.
okay, go ahead. Go a little bit deeper
Well,
then.
I
I
just
mean,
mean like
if
when
you have,
if I would say specific. Oh, go ahead.
if you lose your job, you
Sure.
don't get a new job. You don't fix that problem by just ignoring it. You fix that problem
Exactly.
by facing it head on. Or in a relationship, if your partner is abusive, you don't solve
Right.
that problem by like ignoring the abuse. You have to get rid of them or something. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, definitely more
Okay.
towards like a practical, realistic
Okay.
degree of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
when you encounter or experience conflict, mostly internally, not really not really
Right.
necessarily with people, but when you feel that in yourself, actually being able to look at and say, what is this actually about? And not just doing what we normally do, which is avoid, numb out, distract, stimulate, whatever.
Right.
Because I think why I say this and why I think it's important, because I think this is what grinds people's gears. This is what pushes people to extremes and pushes people into all these kind of coping things that they need is usually there's something behind it that's like because people
Uncomfortable.
will say kind of like you're saying, oh, be authentic or,
Yeah.
be yourself, or people use all these stupid
Yeah.
cliches, whatever. And I think actually what it is in reality is just being willing to admit something to yourself.
Right.
That's pretty much it. That's kind of at least the most practical aspect of it. It's not like
Oh,
you have to tell people your innermost thoughts. It's more so within yourself
right.
admitting and actualizing
Like,
something.
hey, I actually have a problem here, and what exactly is going on? Why is this problem happening? What are the options? What are the mechanisms behind this problem? And then how can I address it inside of your
Yeah.
mind? That's what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just when we encounter conflict,
Oh, yeah.
because it's usually because I mean I think we're naturally programmed to avoid pain, to avoid discomfort. You know what I mean? I think it's just kind of a
No,
natural
yeah,
mechanism.
100%. Yeah, and
Um,
so the more uncomfortable something gets, and the less reflection you've had on it, the more overwhelming it gets. And then,
exactly.
so like most people, they work that 9 to 5 job. Then they have all this stuff being bombarded through the news, more problems on top of more problems on top of more problems. Even worse is people are addicted to the stimulation they get from catastrophizing
Yeah,
politics and arguing with other.
right.
So then they get to a point where they just keep stacking on new problems, and it's all overwhelming as hell. And they have
Yeah.
not came to any resolution on pretty much any of it. And they're only what they try to do is some drugs, some pills, some freaking alcohol and pizza,
Yeah,
and more stimulation from the news.
I mean I do love pizza actually, but
No, no, and
no, I'm
yeah,
just
I know
kidding.
you're kidding,
I'm
but
just
like, I just want to say that that was a groundbreaking moment for me when I found your Instagram, and then I saw that you eat freaking Mexican food like a normal person, and I was
right,
like,
yeah.
you could be yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, we can come back to that. This one point I wanted to make, which is if we look at what people typically regret on their deathbed, then that's what I always use to as a frame of reference,
going deep here,
and
man.
also
We're going deep.
it's just a this is how I think. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying if I encounter a situation where I'm like, oh, I'm afraid, I just remember that I'm gonna be dead.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, well, is this worse than being dead? Like this is the reality I'm living in. I'm gonna be dead, so am I really
right.
that afraid of this thing? And at least for me, that weird way of looking at things helped me
Put it into
do
perspective.
things that I was afraid of doing, or
Right.
say things to people that I was afraid of saying, or whatever. So using that as context, well, if I think about what do people actually regret when they die, you can actually use that to think about that's what's actually going to be meaningful and important in life. And if you're not actually living in any way relatively in alignment with that, obviously you're not going to feel that good and you're going to have all these regrets and all this stuff building up inside of you, which is going to just eat away at you basically. But usually when it comes down to what people regret, it's, I wish I would have said this to this person. I wish I would have been nicer. I wish I would have maybe done this thing or learned this skill or created this thing or traveled to this place. Usually that's what people actually regret. It's not like, damn, I wish I would have taken vinpocetine in a much higher stack, with
Right?
L-huperzine. They're like, damn,
Right?
I should have hit that stack harder. No, people are not worrying about this shit. They're usually, oh, I should have said this. I should have
Right.
done this. So it's like if you can actually think to yourself about
What's important?
what
What's
those would even
actually
be.
important?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, on
Um,
one side of things, because I've thought about that a lot, and I actually traumatized myself thinking about this because I used to be obsessed with death and the meaning of life until I just stopped caring. But like, I
yeah,
realize no matter what you do in life, you're probably going to have
right,
some regrets, and there's never going
for
to be a
sure.
point. There's never going to be a point in your life where you have said everything you wanted to say to everybody. However, no matter how you do it, the most important part of de-stressing your life, but also feeling fulfilled and feeling connected to life, is just assessing what's actually important to me. Is what
Exactly, yeah.
what Joe Biden said to freaking Obama really that important? What about these random internet trolls I have on my YouTube channel that tell me, whatever, I'm vulgar or I'm
Right,
whatever? Like, no, no.
sure.
Or that person who cut me off in traffic or whatever else. Like, when we're going to die one day. How much time do I want to spend on this bullshit? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of my larger point is like
Yeah.
it's easy for many of us to just get consumed with minutia,
Yeah.
which is ultimately just stress inducing and lacking any real fulfillment or meaning or purpose. So of course, if that's 90% of your waking life, of course you're not going to feel very good. I mean, that's just basic math. Um, and again, it's going to be different for everyone. Some people, it's just having a kid, having a family, working their job, having a farm, like basic mundane stuff. I'm not saying you have to fucking be Steve Jobs or like Jimi Hendrix or something grandiose. No, it
Wait
can
a
be
second,
very
Brandon. Wait a second,
basic,
Brandon.
simple shit.
You're telling me that it's going to be different for everybody that make that there everybody's going to have a different purpose in life and everybody's going to be fulfilled from different things. You're telling me that I don't have to be like David Goggins. You're telling me that I don't have to stay hard. I don't have to walk through the fire and flames. That I don't have to make every single aspect of my life optimized and freaking biohacked and I don't have to be an entrepreneur making $1 million. You're telling me that there might be something completely different and individualized and simpler than that?
Yeah, it's controversial and as crazy as that sounds, I think that's what I'm getting at.
Oh
Um,
Jesus! I've been
for sure.
using Hyperion Herbs, and it's interesting how you this whole podcast we haven't even mentioned Hyperion Herbs. See, that's how
Story of my
real Mr.
life.
Brandon Gilbert's actually is. He that's what actually got me onto his products. Is like he doesn't care. He never really puts a lot of effort into like marketing it. He just sells the highest quality herbs, and if you're lucky, you'll actually find them. But I've been using Hyperion Herbs since around like 2014, 2015. We got a little Donwood Reishi here. Been using that since 2020. Cordyceps, which I'm actually using pretty hefty right now because I'm in the middle of a fight camp right now. And I'll tell you, when I started using cordyceps, and I'm talking literally Hyperion Herbs is the one that I can feel. I mean that. Um, I notice immediately my work capacity, my ability to like grapple for double the time. I doubled my time of grappling, and also I noticed my strength seems to be improving at a more rapid rate, where I'm hitting more PRs faster, and also during long work days.
Yeah.
When I'm like, 'cause I'm doing personal training from like, afternoon all the way until 10 p.m. at night. I get tired because I'm showing people how to exercise and all this stuff. I'm super active after already training in the morning. It's really, really hard for me to maintain focus and even standing upright over the time. But when I take cordyceps, and sometimes I'll mix that with some rhodiola, would love to see a Hyperion Herbs rhodiola extract. My ability to overcome that, afternoon crash or whatever is
Mm,
tremendously improved. I have the most amazing physical, but also mental stamina. Now, I'll tell you another thing that really helped me was definitely this gynostemma. Now,
yeah,
the packaging I've noticed has changed on and off, but it is indeed
right.
Hyperion Herbs gynostemma.
Yep.
And I love the gynostemma because it gives you like this energetic quality similar to a Panax ginseng, where you feel kind of like
Hmm.
that mental kind of boost and the ability to
Yep.
focus for longer. But at the same time, it's a tranquil feeling because a lot of people, when they
Yep.
take a more aggressive ginseng, they report not being able to sleep at night. They report just like their mind like speeding up and racing out of nowhere. But this is a lot different. It's a lot of a more gentler kind of ginseng
Hmm.
feel. And also my stamina and my breathing during training with the gynostemma has dramatically improved, and I find less soreness after hard training sessions as well. So just had
Yeah,
to
that's
throw
a
that
good
out there.
lineup, man. Yeah,
Just had to
that's
throw that out.
yeah, it's cool. I appreciate you mentioning that. I mean, I think I try to source products that people actually feel.
Hmm.
That's my main objective. I think a lot of companies get caught in the minutia, in the it's got this percentage of this chemical and it's this, this, and this, and I'm like, that's cool, that's important. You definitely need that to, assure quality and consistency across batches, but that's not the end all be all. Ultimately, it's how it makes you feel and what it actually does for you, and it actually does the thing that people were taking it for. So cordyceps, people want more energy, they want more endurance. It really helps with the blood oxygenation and the overall like lung capacity and all that stuff, which that's what we want. So that's cool. It's really cool to hear, and I think it mirrors what a lot of. I mean, I had another client of mine years ago in Colorado who owned an MMA and a boxing gym, and he was giving cordyceps and polyrachis ant to some of his fighters, and he was
Yes.
just he was just like, dude, this is crazy. Like the jumps he was seeing in their performance, in their recovery, in their endurance, and all of it. And then he actually, I think his father or his father-in-law or something, had something where he had really low blood oxygen levels, so he had to have
Mm-hmm.
like an oxygen apparatus at all times
Mm-hmm.
around him in case he had like a dip. And he gave him cordyceps, and he had him hooked up to the like blood oxygen measurement
Mm-hmm.
thing. And he was saying within like 15 minutes of taking it, his levels normalized like and were high, just from the cordyceps. So it's I mean, obviously, if you have more oxygen in your blood, you're gonna feel better. You're gonna feel more awake. You're gonna feel more clear. That's just simple math.
Definitely. So I mean, so first of all, I've had actually multiple fighters that I was training. I had a whole kind of MMA gym that I was training earlier last year, actually, including their head coach, where they're all competing, they're getting ready to turn pro and everything. And cordyceps was a primary thing that I actually had gotten them on, and specifically, Mr. Brandon Gilbert and the Hyperion Herbs brand cordyceps, because I know for a fact that if they take that stuff during a fight camp, it's going to work, and it's going to work every single time. And I had most of them taking a baseline dose, depending on what they can afford. But I had one of my fighters take a tablespoon, like on his hardest training sessions, and especially on his actual fight day. And he was telling me that like his normal like 3 hour like MMA practice in the evening, he would finish that and it would be like 9:30 at nighttime, and he'd still want to keep going. So they do an extra hour of sparring just because they had that cordyceps in the stack. So your training capacity dramatically improves with it. And I found the same exact thing. And personally, I stack the cordyceps with a little bit of caffeine as well, and polyrachis black
Mhm.
ant, as well as pine pollen. And I'll tell you that Hyperion Herbs pine pollen hit differently for some reason. Um, and dude, like literally, go to jujitsu off of a hard work day at like 5:30 p.m. at nighttime, and I could not help myself but do 3 hours of training most of those days, especially when I do a whole freaking tablespoon of the cordyceps. And that's a lot, by the
Yeah,
way, for the average person.
it
But when
is.
you're trying to get the most out of an actual sport, like that's where these herbs a lot of times will really shine. Considering, the Olympic Games athletes or whatever who came out saying that they were taking cordyceps and they were winning all those gold medals. So I actually that this shirt here, they are all 15 pounds heavier than me. I actually made a shirt out of this, yes.
Oh wow.
15 pounds heavier than me. This was me taking a mega dose of cordyceps and pine pollen and Polyericus black ant. I was taking the Nell root at the time too. And I just dominated. I had this crazy like boost in masculine energy. Like my yang
Yeah,
gene was through the roof or something. And I tore
yeah.
through them. But not just for athletic performance though. But yeah, that was like my most amazing experience with Hyperion Herbs out of anything, honestly.
Yeah,
But
I
I've
remember
had
you
like,
telling me about that.
yeah, yeah. And I've had family members who had like I had one who was lifetime of smoking. They got COPD, and I had actually had them start taking some cordyceps as well as some gynosema, and they noticed that their breathing was better. They were able to sleep better, and they were suddenly coughing
Hmm.
up a lot of the phlegm to the point where they actually had no more phlegm, and they were recovering, or at least it seemed. But after about 4 weeks of noticing their symptoms dramatically improved, they just stopped taking the herbs and went back to their normal habits. So, for what is worth, like I've seen it work for regular people who have health issues as well.
That's super cool, man. I really like to hear that because, being an internet exclusively entrepreneur for 13, 14 years,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm a little bit removed from how people actually take it and how it actually really
Hmm.
benefits them. And of course, I get emails and testimonials, but it's not quite the same. And obviously, I've seen numerous benefits and life-changing effects in my own life, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but people are skeptical of that because they're like, well, yeah, obviously you sell it, so of course you're going to say that. I'm like, well, actually, I only sell it because I had these benefits and experiences. So
Right.
it's which is why I have so few products because it's what I have the most intimate experience with. I could sell 100 different herbs and supplements, but it's like I don't really have the experience. I don't necessarily believe in them quite as much and know they work for a wide array of people, because there's obviously herbs like Tongkat Ali and these like really stimulant aggressive herbs that of course can be beneficial for certain people in certain instances of yes, of course. But in terms of a general tonic for the general population, like
Mhm.
forget it. So I'm curious if you have any experiences with, more of those kinds of herbs and then how it compares to kind of what you notice from things like cordyceps.
Right. So, so I the best Makuna that I ever had was hands down Hyperion Herbs Makuna when he used to sell it.
Right.
Um, and I notice, so first of all, I notice a lot of people on the internet, they don't seem to even be able to identify good quality Makuna. Because Hyperion Herbs Makuna, when I was taking it, it was like a white substance, like a white powder, and it had
Right.
like a chocolatey type taste, and it was delicious.
Hmm.
And I was
Hmm.
taking like a half a teaspoon in the morning and a half a teaspoon before training. That's a lot. Um, now, and I think you should bring that Makuna back. I'm just saying, whatever, but it was good stuff. So,
It was,
however,
yeah.
yeah, really, and it's hard to find, by the way, nowadays. Like, it's hard to
It
find.
is, yeah.
Everyone's selling some bullshit now. But so let's see. So I mean, I get a lot of clients who like and YouTube subscribers and stuff who are convinced that their dopamine levels are in the shitter and like their testosterone is
Hmm.
low and they got high estrogen and all this weird stuff. And they're asking me about like Tonkat Ali and all this other crazy stuff. And what I notice is almost never do they even have like a baseline of nutrition and basic kind of habits established, first of all.
Hmm.
And so almost always I ask them, hey, like, have you tried just these like basic things first and foremost? The other thing
Hmm.
is, for me, I've taken tyrosine, I've taken phenylalanine, I've taken yohimbe bark extract, yohimbine HCl, um, and I have tried things, on the other side, the serotonin side, like 5-HTP and acetyl-L-carnitine and all these things, and ephedra. And so
Hmm.
those things in the short term I found can really give you a boost. Some of them are just not good at all. Like my experience with Tonkat Ali was a headache and then just like I couldn't sleep for a while, especially the more
Gave me
potent.
nosebleeds.
No, it made you get, it gave you nosebleeds?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Um, and so if they do work, they work for really good for a while. Makuna though has kind of worked consistently for me, mostly with the good quality stuff. But like things like tyrosine, they'll make you feel like a freaking beast, like a tank, super motivated and all this stuff. But then after a couple of days, either it loses the effect or it starts
Hmm.
having the opposite effect altogether, where I start to feel tired and lethargic and I'm just like, and burnt out. And I start to feel exhausted or something, where I start to crave balance, peace, and serenity more than anything. Um,
Hmm.
and so I just find that, for one, most people don't really even need like a testosterone boost per se. Like they usually haven't even
Right.
gotten blood work to check. And then
Right.
dopamine type boosting herbs, like they can work, but they're very unsustainable over long term. They're very inconsistent. And it's more of a stimulation
Hmm.
above what your body's naturally capable of, rather
Right.
than something that's actually strengthening you or increasing your health.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff, eventually your body down regulates too and just stops responding to, or like you were describing, you crash because you're up. And then once you're up, there's only one way to go, which is down. And
Right.
then now you're just riding this up and down roller coaster and chasing, different highs and stimulants. And then it's like people can go so far down that rabbit hole. I mean, I did for years, at late 20s, I was experimenting with every supplement, every herb, everything I could get my hands on. And then
Right.
after a while, you just lose what a baseline is. And you're constantly, it's almost like you're kind of like a functional
Drug
nutritional drug
addict.
addict.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to speedball. You're trying to balance your upper and your downer
Right.
because your system is so dysregulated and your liver's all fucking inflamed and irritated from all the supplements and all the
Yeah.
nutraceuticals that are more or less just synthetic isolates, but because it's like natural supplement, you tell yourself that it's different than a pharmaceutical, but in actuality it's the same
Oh yeah.
thing. So it's like you're just riding that wave, riding that roller coaster, and it's just I see a lot of people get sucked into it, and it's not sustainable, and which is why over the years I think I've gotten more boring and just told people like, yeah, just relax, chill out, like don't crave so much stimulation,
Right.
and you'll be much better off in the long term. Um, just basic, simple stuff like that.
Right.
Because if you want to have more energy, you need to learn to actually relax and be more chill, and you'll
Right.
automatically have a bit more energy because you're not just constricting and fighting yourself all the time.
Right. I mean,
Um,
like, so for me, it really did get to that point where I felt like I was a functional, like, nutritional drug addict. And I remember even I was messaging you. I was messaging him too, like on Instagram. I was like, hey man, like, what's the best? What was your experience? Like, in your experience, what did you find was the best way to megadose reishi or megadose cordyceps? How can I like
right.
megadose pine pollen to like feel like I'm on crack or whatever? And and he, and it was bad because I was like I would be already be megadosing. I'm like, well, how can I megadose it more? How can I optimize the so-called high I'm trying to get? And it's like, first of all, Brandon's made so many videos already about tonic herbs are not about that, right? But
Right.
because we're so used to that in our Western culture or whatever, like more is always better type of thing. Well, anyway,
Hmm.
um, so I had great results with things like megadosing pine pollen, megadosing cordyceps, megadosing mucuna. But I found the best thing is like, so tonic herbs, for example. So instead of having this unsustainable up and down and chasing a high type of thing, I started to look more towards my baseline level of
Yep.
immunity, my baseline level of mental health and serenity, my baseline level
Yep.
of energy and performance and strength and digestion and relaxation. And instead of looking at, these freaking super potent, like, freaking things that'll just explode one quality beyond anything humanly possible, I started to look at what things can help me cultivate more efficiency over time. So the
Yep.
concept of like, what they call adaptogens or
Right.
tonic herbs or whatever is this idea that, so you take something like, for example, let's say gynosema, right? It's regarded as a ginseng-like compound per se, right? Well, you take gynosema, and mostly tonic herbs work in a similar fashion. At the beginning, you will probably feel something in the short term. You might feel a sense of serenity overcome you, a little bit of calmness and relaxation, and also a subtle boost in energy. But
For
as
sure.
you keep taking it, first of all, you might need less and less, is what I found. At first, a lot of it will go a long way. Like you'll feel this super hardcore thing, but over time, the effects build. Your body gets more efficient at producing energy, at using the food that you're already eating and digesting it better and absorbing it better and turning it into vitality. Your sleep improves over time. The accumulation of improved sleep builds the accumulation of vitality over time. The accumulation of improved digestion and absorption of nutrients builds more vitality over time. And the biggest thing for me, and this is what I've ultimately found, is the smaller doses that you can sustain of things like cordyceps, reishi, gynosema, and even I take Panax ginseng at a very tiny dose. I've actually noticed that over time, it's like this adaptive quality, your ability to actually get stronger from your life stressors improves. To me, I think
Yep.
that's like the ultimate benefit that I've gotten from a lot of these things is when I go to training, if I take something like freaking caffeine, in the short term, I could fucking kill a workout and
Yeah.
destroy it, and I perform really good in the short term, and I put on this great performance. But what you do in any one day or any one session is just performing on what you've already adapted to. Whatever you've already trained to be able to do is the performance you'll have on any given day. But the idea of training or the idea of learning is to get better from each session as you keep going. The little
Yep.
adaptations you make and improvements, they build on top of each other. And so instead of just obliterating myself and hitting a bunch of personal records on like, deadlifts or something in one session or whatever it might be, um, I'm exhausted after that. Caffeine, I get a caffeine crash. I can't sleep that
Yep.
night. The next day, I'm like exhausted. And so it's like you obliterate your body with a rocket of caffeine and adrenaline using the caffeine to get this crazy performance in one day, but then you're just like destroyed over long term and burnt out. So
Yep.
with something like cordyceps and reishi, the combination's been shown to actually improve your testosterone to cortisol ratio. There's studies on athletes that showed that. What I find is in one workout, I'm able to perform better. If I do take reishi during a training cycle, I feel more calm. Especially jujitsu, I'm able to see moves before they happen. It feels like I'm in the Matrix. Like I can see someone going for an armbar before it happens,
Yep.
and it's not as stressful. Like on reishi and cordyceps, cordyceps literally improves my ability to work in one session, but also the ability to like the adaptation I get from it, the increase of energy from that training session improves over time. I find that I improve faster on a day-to-day basis over the long term, rather than the caffeine just like improving my one-off performance and then being exhausted for a week. I'm actually improving in the short term and being able to output more in one session, but then also being able to recover more and improve more. And it's a long-term stacking of adaptations. So it improves your ability to adapt and get better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think what you're describing is on one hand, you have something like caffeine, which is just, stimulating your adrenals, jacking up cortisol, norepinephrine, noradrenaline, all this kind of stuff, ramping up your nervous system, which, yeah, short term, great, whatever. But your body pays the price for that. You pay a tax. Whereas something like cordyceps and the other herbs, it's not working on adrenaline. If anything, it's calming cortisol. It's
Yeah.
chilling you out. It's putting you more in a relaxed state, let's say. But it's actually working on, your actual metabolic pathways, your actual kind of like chi production pathways, if you want to put it in that context, in terms
Hmm.
of using chi as kind of metabolic day-to-day energy,
Hmm.
improving how you breathe, how your body utilizes oxygen, how it eliminates waste, like all of those basic mechanics. I mean, even your blood flow, blood circulation, all those things. Um, so yeah, it's just, I feel like the tonic herbs are kind of like a degree of training. It's like going to the
Yes.
gym, but for your insides. And over
Yeah.
time, of course, it builds and it stacks up.
Hmm.
So I mean, it perfectly lines up with everything you're just describing. That's also like what I've seen in my life as well over the last 15, 20 years that I've taken those herbs. Um, and also for me personally, like I don't really take many herbs at all anymore. But I
Right.
know it's not like I lost any of the benefits.
Right.
Not at all. I just keep building and building
Right.
on that foundation that helped me. So it's not like one of those things where if you stop taking it or you miss a day or you stop or whatever, that you're just all of a sudden gonna fall down and lose the benefits.
Right.
It's really not like that at all.
And
It
that's
just seems
actually
like what
been
you're saying.
shown in scientific studies. It's actually been shown. So, like they did, for example, with ginseng, Panax ginseng, it has been shown that those ginsenosides, if you take it for 2 months,
Yeah.
the benefits actually last for another 2 months after cessation. And that's a short-term study, you know?
Yep.
And this idea of like building your baseline, that is really the predominant kind of theory surrounding things like, polyphenols from vegetables or whatever. These ginsenosides that are basically found in gynostemma,
Hmm.
and the compounds in reishi and whatnot. The idea is that they kind of either damage your body slightly in the short term, which triggers your body
Yep.
to get stronger. They improve
Yep.
your actual machinery, and they give you kind
Hmm.
of like an upgrade under the hood, and your
Yep.
tissues become stronger, your cells become stronger, like he's saying, to the point where when you stop taking them, because Brandon's been taking these herbs for like what, almost 20 years?
Since yeah, like 2004 or five.
And so if he stops taking them now, like his machinery's been upgraded. It's a similar way when, for me, because I do like, deadlifts and stuff like that, and I'm training in the gym.
Yep.
If I, have a 500-pound deadlift right now and I stop training and I go do jujitsu or something with that strength, I'm throwing people around even if I don't still do the strength training. It takes something like, several years for you to lose like half of the adaptation. So,
Right.
yeah, it is like an internal training type of thing.
I mean, that's kind of part of the classical definition of an herb being able to be a tonic.
Right.
So it definitely, it all lines up, which is why there's also so few herbs that actually fit that criteria.
And I think that's
So
also
yeah,
why it's kind of hard for the mainstream medicine to like accept that, is because when they do studies on an herb, they're like 2 week studies. And it's like, so if you see anything in scientific studies, you'll see reishi can improve sleep and immunity and be used as like a adjunct therapy for cancer treatment. But really, you would need year-long studies to really
at
fully
least.
understand it, especially for something like reishi, because that is
Yeah.
an herb. In my experience, it is not just working on, my body and calming me down. For me personally, and this might sound woo-woo, but I
Yeah.
had like, I really felt like it was opening a spiritual realm that I hadn't been in before. Like I felt like there was something non-physical happening to me, but that's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have that experience. It
Yeah.
definitely hit me that way early on. I think it's
Mm,
just something with the brain and the nervous system
yeah.
and changing the way people's emotional body is relating. Like these different, more subtle aspects
Mm,
definitely works on those things for some people. I mean, obviously not
right.
obviously not everyone will feel that or be tuned into those kind of sensations, but a lot
Right.
of people report that, and definitely that's what got me into tonic herbs in the first place. To be
Right.
totally honest, I mean, have more energy, okay, whatever, cool, fine. I mean, I wasn't really tired anyways to start off with, but
Mm,
just those more subtle, slightly more esoteric principles with
the
reishi, that was what
mystical.
really captured my attention, you know.
Right. The mystical lore,
Well, that's
basically.
cool, man. I really appreciate you sharing that story and your background with the different herbs, and it definitely, yeah, it lines up with a lot of my experience as well. And
Hmm.
it's pretty amazing we're able to access these kinds of things so easily these days, so readily available. And
Especially in a world where you got these biohacking gurus who are trying to convince you to take 20 to 30 different supplements every morning,
yeah,
when in reality, if you just take like a small, tiny kind of collection of something like
yeah,
reishi and cordyceps, right? You only need a small, tiny bit to have like, all the benefits that are promised to you from these crazy stacks people are taking.
yeah, and that's also why I sell so few products because it's just so few things can cover so many bases that
Hmm.
might as well just keep it simple, keep it easy, and plus mushrooms tend to work for a lot of people. Not everyone, of course, some people don't
Hmm.
jive, but for the widest group of people to have the least amount of side effects and the most amount of benefits, the mushrooms and things like gynostemma really check a lot of boxes, and even holy basil. I'm working right now to come out with a holy basil extract
In a powder
um,
form or another tincture?
powder this time.
That would be beautiful.
Uh,
That would be
yeah, so
perfect.
it should be in the next month or two. I'm still doing some testing to kind of vibe it out. I'm also working on a mushroom coffee
Oh
blend.
God.
Um,
You had
basically, like,
to, right?
I
Because
mean,
it's
one
like
of
a
my clients,
trend.
yeah,
Or
one
you?
of my clients suggested it actually.
Mm,
He was like, yeah, I could promote the shit out of this, and I'm like, all
okay.
right, well, I guess I'll give it a shot. I would just at least like, I don't drink coffee really.
Right.
I've never actually drank straight up coffee.
Mm.
Um, and it's not really my thing. So I'm
You
like,
were
I don't have
drinking
any personal
bulletproof
experience.
coffee for a while.
Oh yeah, I was. That's
Yeah.
true. I forgot about that. For I guess a year or so, I was hitting the bulletproof coffee
Yeah.
with the butter and the
Yeah.
MCT oil
Yeah.
and the collagen and all that shit. Um, but it's funny because before that, I'd never really had coffee, and before that,
Mm.
and after that, I really don't drink it. I don't have anything against it. It's just personally what I'm trying to do. It doesn't makes sense right now. So
Mm.
I'm gonna do like an organic instant coffee with reishi mixed in probably,
Mm.
just because it's trendy and also too like people have asked me about it. A lot of
Yeah.
people drink coffee. A lot of people already put mushrooms in their coffee,
Right.
so it's kind of like a no-brainer.
It's true. That's why
And
I've
also,
been sipping on this whole podcast, honestly. I mean, for me, it's kind of to me. I'm a little bothered, I guess, like annoyed by the trendiness of the mushroom coffee, mostly because I see some of my friends posting it, and it's like I don't want to say any brands, but just it's
yeah,
mycelium when it should be fruiting
exactly.
bodies, and then they're like, yeah, I feel so calm and I feel all this stuff, and I'm like, bruh, like, have you ever tried this Hyperion Herbs stuff, like, or just like trying, like that's not. I don't know how you feel anything from that because back in the day when I used to take that brand or that, I thought I was
Hmm.
feeling something, but then when I took the real cordyceps, for example, I was blown out of
Yeah,
the water. So
yeah,
it's good that you're creating one of these things. I just hope that it gets big.
yeah, and also just trying to like maybe reach a wider audience. Um,
Right.
of people that maybe are intimidated by the idea of all this other stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
something coffee is like a middle ground. It's like, oh, it
Mm-hmm.
already has this thing in here and it's healthy and I can try it. And then maybe branch off into the pure stuff and
Mm-hmm.
something else. So just because it's a lot, it's a learning curve, I
Yeah, it's
noticed
true.
that whenever I was doing a lot of advertising on social media and spending a lot of money, it's just my buying cycle for new customers is quite long
Mm-hmm.
because it's like first people have to already be open to the concept of taking herbs and know
Mm-hmm.
what they are and know that that's okay and know that it's not like psychedelics or drugs. Because believe it or not, some people think there's mushrooms you put on your salad and there's psychedelic mushrooms and
Right.
that's it. People think that's all there is. I mean,
And it doesn't
I
it
was
doesn't it doesn't help when you have these people, saying like, "Oh, Rishi is like the spiritual thing." Not to say it's not, but like then they're really like, "Oh shit, if I hit the Rishi, I'm gonna be like have a manic episode or something."
No, I mean, I actually get a decent amount of search hits every month from Google of people Googling is reishi psychedelic. So, I
That's
mean, that's
hilarious.
a real. And
Yeah.
I was on this lady's podcast a couple weeks ago, and we did like a 15-minute meeting to go over everything, and then
Mm.
we were sitting down to start to record the podcast, and she starts talking about how much she loves mushrooms and how she did a journey that changed her
I've
life, and I
seen
was like,
that. I saw that.
oh, did she post it already?
I think it was on Instagram, I swear. Maybe I'm
I
wrong.
don't know if I don't know if
Okay.
she's posted it yet. I think this might be a different one.
Like, wait a second. I didn't approve of this. All right, continue. Though you're
Well, no,
saying.
no, no. So she's saying this, and I'm like,
Yeah.
hold on. We're not talking about psychedelic mushrooms, right? And she's like, what? I thought
Oh
that's what we
no.
were going to talk about on this podcast. And I was like, dude, you think I've been selling psychedelic mushrooms online since
Legal.
2010? I'm like, what? What? And she's like, wait, so what other kind of mushrooms are there?
Oh
And I was
no.
like, medicinal mushrooms? Like, what's on the bio? She's like, oh. So, so I was like, yeah, people really don't know. They think there's just psychedelic mushrooms and mushrooms you put on your salad.
So I know that you're like you kind of talk a little down on this author, but for people who are like really want to get into it, I
For
think
sure,
this
yeah,
book,
that's
yeah, by
that's
Ron
great.
Teagarden, The Ancient Wisdom of the Chinese,
Absolutely.
like that'll kind of help clarify you all and get you up to speed. I just
Yep.
recommend you maybe buy the extract powders instead of the capsules that are on his website,
Right.
buy Hyperion Herbs instead. But yeah, this will kind of help to demystify a lot of the craziness that you'll see out there.
Yeah, it's a great jumping off point. It's a great introduction for sure.
Yeah.
It's where everyone starts and can start. There's also another book called Adaptogens,
I have that
which is
one
a
by
pretty,
Dr.
yeah,
Winston or something.
yeah, exactly. That's a
Yeah.
good one as well. It's a good introductory overview to the subject. And even though I don't really agree with all of the herbs they classify as
As
adaptogens, but it
adaptogens,
doesn't
like
matter.
ashwagandha, I agree with that for sure. I think the
I think
word
every,
adaptogen needs to have like a more specific context and maybe also, and individualize it a little bit more. I like the phrase tonic herb a little bit more because at least in Chinese medicine, they understand like, hey, this, tonic herbs, they build up your baseline over time, but also
exactly.
it depends on your constitution.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's just me being splitting hairs and being weird and trying to differentiate things. But
I think it
for most,
matters.
yeah,
I
I'm just saying for most people, it's
Yeah.
colloquial, interchangeable, adaptogen, tonic herb, whatever.
As long as you don't think that taking ashwagandha universally is going to make, is going to freaking be double directional for everybody.
Ex-
Like, because the
Exactly.
idea of like adaptogens is like if you take this herb and you're stressed, it's going to calm you down. But if you take this herb and
Right.
you're too calm already, it's going to pump you up. That's not really how a lot of these herbs work. And so
Nope.
for like Panax ginseng, I know you could probably make an hour-long video ranting about this, I'm sure. Like
Sure.
someone who takes a real legit Panax ginseng and they make a concoction and everything, a decoction, and they're already too hot, and too speedy and everything.
Right.
And
Right.
especially if they're young and super active and healthy, and they take a teaspoon of like the powder or whatever, they
Sure.
will most likely not have a good time. But if you take someone who has the
Exactly.
opposite constitution, who's like weak, fragile, elderly, malnourished, that is the prime
Right.
candidate, But it's considered an adaptogen, so it's like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Ginseng's a real one of the more pain in the ass herbs because it's not a singular category.
hmm
Its effects vary depending on how old it is.
hmm
Like ginseng that's 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years old is not the same as ginseng that's 3 to 5 years old, which is what is commonly available. Ginseng singularly on its own is not the same thing as ginseng in a tonic formula with, because ginseng is in sleep formulas too,
Oh man.
which
Oh
that
yeah,
confuses
yeah,
people. It's like, wait, if I take ginseng by itself, it can be like a stimulant and it's like kind of
yeah.
energizing or whatever. But then there's all these Chinese traditional formulas that are for
hmm
sleep that have ginseng in them.
hmm
So it's again, herbalism. It can be quite complicated and nuanced, especially something like ginseng.
Yeah.
Because I have stuff in my personal collection that's 50 to 300 years old, and the effects of those extracts are nothing like ginseng people typically think. So that's just a whole other thing. But it's again, none of that stuff is publicly available, and that's not something anyone could ever really access, anyways.
The
So it
Hyperion
doesn't
Herbs
really even.
Private Reserve.
Well, I used to have that, yeah, but not
Yeah.
anymore.
It's like one of the only places you can get, freaking these super epic, like old ginseng roots for a decent price. But, yep.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why I had to stop doing that is because the guy said I was making it too accessible and too easy for people.
Yeah.
Because at least with ginseng and the older stuff, he's saying there's a big karmic aspect to it, and this whole deeper other thing that people have to go through in order to open those doors, in order to be able to earn the right to access those things.
Mm.
And I was just kind of like making it a little bit commercial, and anyone could access it. It was like pearls before swine kind of a
Yeah.
concept.
Mm.
So I had to just kind of abandon it for that reason.
Wow. Wow.
Which, which is the thing is like why there's tends to be a lot of folklore around many of these things. Some of it sometimes is superstition or just cultural fantasy, yes. But then for some substances, it is absolutely a real thing where that substance contains real power,
Mm-hmm.
real esoteric impact on people. Wild old ginseng is one of them, and there's
Mm-hmm.
things like agarwood and kiara and kinam and things like that, but then also various internal arts
Mm-hmm.
that these things historically were always protected and
Yeah.
hidden within secret societies
Yeah.
and passed person to person. It was
Yeah.
never meant for the masses. It was never a populist kind of idea where anyone can access it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much the case for internal training, and especially
Yeah.
the higher level, like real stuff that people are
Yeah.
actually doing.
I've been
Because what
told. I've been
people,
told it's still like that, where there's still things that have not been taught to Westerners.
a lot, well,
Yeah.
there's just things that will never be public,
Right.
period.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's one of those things that enter unless you're in that door, then people will never know. And I can say the like pretty much all of what people are exposed to and familiar with in terms of Taoism or Buddhism
Mm-hmm.
is mostly fake and made up and has nothing to do with what the practitioners and the skilled people are actually doing. And oftentimes it's the complete opposite.
Hmm.
Basically, they lie and make up stuff for the public specifically,
So
but
that
it's
they
not
don't
what they
discover the
actually.
actual secrets and gain the power.
That's part of it, yeah, and also part of it is just supply and demand.
Hmm.
I mean, there is like I'm saying is the karmic deeper aspect of like certain things being in certain people to actually be able to access things. And then also too, the wider point is that basically from what I can tell, mostly every outer door public religion is kind of the same, meaning like be nice, be kind, don't kill, like be a good person,
Mm-hmm.
be calm. These like basic ideas, whether it's Buddhism or Taoism or Christianity or Judaism or Islam or whatever, the outer door public level teachings, it's all pretty much kind of the same exact thing if you really simplify it down, mechanically speaking, because it's just for the public, it's for the masses, and that's what's actually relevant for people. And for a lot of people, that's a struggle. For a lot of people, like being nice is a struggle, or these basic like
True.
aspects of humanity
Mm-hmm.
is just sort of like where they're at. So that's why the teachings are that way. But that's not what the actual skilled higher level practitioners in that tradition are doing in any
Mm-hmm.
way, shape, or form. So not that it matters, but I just think it's interesting for me personally, and it definitely relates to something like ginseng and many other like crazy herbal substances that exist in these traditions that are
Mm-hmm.
not publicly known and will probably never be publicly known. But I've been lucky enough to try some of them and also just be told about some of them. I mean, within the herbal traditions, like there's pills that can give you literally magic powers, literally heal you of all kinds of crazy shit, give you insane high level skill just from taking a certain magical pill.
And I
Like
think on
it's a
one,
it's a
like
real thing.
on some level, like a lot of these things probably are better off not being mainstream anyway, or at least like more
Absolutely.
of it, because like if something is that powerful, you already know there's going to be some greedy millionaire or whatever it is,
Exactly.
somebody who wants to water it down and bastardize it. It's pretty much all of everything that actually is worth a damn in the internal arts or the
Yeah.
herbalism category, or they turn into some kind of trendy, watered down,
Yeah.
impotent for the purpose of
Yep.
profit and mass
Yep.
consumption, and then it turns into a wild west, just like a lot of Tai Chi stuff. And so, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I just tell stories like that just to plant the seed and set the context for certain people who might hear it and might
Mhm.
find that relevant or useful, but for most people it's completely irrelevant and that's fine.
I mean, because like
But
most people are not able to actually even appreciate the finer things or quality stuff. Everyone wants like a Walmart type mentality. They want the cheapest herb, or the most simplest and easiest martial art to get into, or whatever it is, for the easiest price or whatever. Like people don't actually care about the overall quality or the significance or the impact of something, or they're not willing to spend hours looking into the lore of something or whatever, and therefore they're not going to be able to fully captivate the essence and the beauty of what it actually is, like finer teas and kung fu style brewing and stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, a lot of these ideas that we're talking about were just sort of baked into traditional Asian culture.
Hmm. Which is
Like, I
interesting.
mean, it's just sort of part and parcel. Like, we don't really have it in our culture because we don't really have
Hmm.
treasures in our modern culture.
Hmm.
So there's obviously no real
Interesting.
necessity for people to have these kinds of attitudes, and we're kind of, our culture is what 300 years old, 200 years old. So it's like we're just
Hmm.
kind of figuring shit out versus Chinese culture 5,000 years.
Yeah, true.
It's a
That's
little bit
true.
different of
Yeah.
a mindset.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, man, just appreciate you coming on and sharing a lot of this information and your insight, your knowledge, your experience. I feel like I definitely learned a lot. I feel like we had a lot of similar experiences growing up and definitely similar experiences with the tonic herbs and
Hmm.
trying different crazy things. And, definitely appreciate what you're doing and what you're sharing with the world. And grateful to have you as a client. And hopefully people have enjoyed the podcast and the conversation so far.
Definitely. This was an amazing conversation, just as I expected it would be, honestly. And I found it very stimulating. And obviously, I always learn a lot from your content. So The feeling is definitely mutual. And also, again, Hyperion Herbs, like 100% best stuff out there. And I don't say that as someone who's a, Hyperion Herbs shill or whatever. It legitimately is the very few like brands out there that actually works and consistently works. So very awesome stuff. And I look forward, I'm glad you're back on YouTube, and look forward to seeing more awesome content in the future.
Yeah, so how can people find you or learn more about what you're doing?
So Instagram is at Coach Wolfgang VL. I actually have that on my shirt. Let's see if we can get it without knocking things off. Probably kind of blurry and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit dark.
Whatever. At Coach Wolfgang VL on Instagram. And then YouTube is Chalice of Immortality. And yeah, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram. Shoot me a DM. Subscribe to my YouTube, and I'll be making a lot more herb and nutrition type videos. And maybe Brandon Gilbert passing the torch over to me now, since he doesn't want to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, we'll see about that, man. Well, thanks again, and definitely everyone check out his YouTube channel, Instagram, and we will see you again on the next episode.